Previously on Transformers University, we took a look at the powerhouse that was the Transformers brand in 1985 and how it continued to take over the world as the most popular toy line of the year. And today, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the online fandom, the merchandising surrounding the brand, and the first video game ever made for Transformers. Right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind the website, TFU.INFO, this podcast, and many other places you can find TFU.INFO. You can find me. This is the day Transformers University turns 40.
I'm a man! I'm 40!
Episode 40, that is, and we're going to talk about a few of the odds and ends from 1985, things that will eventually grow bigger as time goes on, but for 1985, each one of these is kind of small enough to fit in its own portion of this episode. So today, we are talking about the online fandom from 1985, and there's not much. We are talking merch, as in merchandising.
Merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made.
And we are talking what was a budding new industry in 1985, and that is the world of video games and the first Transformers video game. But before I jump into all that fun stuff, first off, I just want to thank you all for supporting the show via our Amazon links, tfu.info/Amazon, or via our Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO. If you haven't signed up, then you don't know is that you've probably heard this episode way in advance. Because I am trying to get a jump start. Being a new dad, I'm trying to get a jump start on all the quiet time I do have during my paternity leave to get a few episodes in the can. So, this one has been available to our Patreon students. You can join for as little as $1 a month. Now, on to the first topic at hand, and that is the online fandom. Now, last time around, when we talked 1984, I was able to hunt down the first person to post about the Transformers comic. I did do a little digging for this. I didn't reach out to the gentleman because I wasn't entirely sure if it was him, and time just did not permit me to reach out to Bill Flanagan, who made the first online post about the Transformers cartoon back on October 6th, 1985. And that post was made to a Usenet news group entitled net.comics. And Google does have a bit of an archive of Usenet. It is a little bit complicated to search, but I was able to pull it off to some extent with the aid of the TF Wiki. And there were a few other posts in 1985 about Transformers, but most of them were just passing comments. This was still the first post about the show specifically. Now, as I mentioned, this post was made by a gentleman by the name of Bill Flanagan. He liked to review cartoons and rated them on a scale of 1 through 6, 1 being the low rating, 6 being the high rating. And here is what he wrote. Transformers. When I first saw this show, my reaction was enthusiastic, to say the least. That's Japanese, in quotes. I could tell by the use of dramatic angles, the slightly jerky motion of 12 frames per second, and the patented, and that's in quotes, use of shadow colors on human figures. My enthusiasm for the art has not died down much, but I had never thought of the writing. The story centers around two research teams sent out from the planet Cybertron to find energy. One team is the Autobots, good guys in parentheses, and the other team is the Decepticons, bad guys in parentheses. Apparently, all of the self-aware machines on Cybertron can transform from humanoid robot to a useful vehicle or weapon. Well, these two teams happen to land on Earth at the same time. The patriotic Decepticons are trying to exploit Earth in any way possible to get energy to Cybertron. If they can supply Cybertron with enough energy, it seems, they will be able to rule it. The Autobots are trying to stop the Decepticons. Later, the show degenerates to the point in which the Decepticons are just trying to rule the Earth or defeat the Autobots. The characters are standard to anyone who has read comics. We have the stout defender of truth, justice, and a good socket wrench, Optimus Prime. There is the evil scheming, he who schemes and runs away villain, Megatron. Don't forget the token human boy, Spike. There are also plenty of assorted stereotypes. These are played by some familiar voices, Peter Cullen and Michael Bell from the Voltrons, Scatman Crothers from various prior performances. Remember the Mailman in Chico and the Man, and Casey Kasem from American Top 40 on radio and American Top 10 on TV. He also played Mark on Battle of the Planets and Robin the Boy Wonder on Super Friends. He also played Shaggy on Scooby-Doo. And I'm going to take a quick note in here. Think about this. This is a time before IMDb, long before IMDb. So people did kind of have to make these notes and did have these arguments with nothing to settle them. But the actual performances when they happened on TV, because this is the early days of VCRs as well. All right, back to the review. The soundtrack is unimpressive, mostly a replay of the original theme you've heard 1,000 times on the commercials, and that's one riff they play each time a scene changes. It gets as annoying as the chant between scenes of He-Man. The animation is still nice. It's more consistent than G.I. Joe or Mask, and seems to be top of the line for animation that is storyboarded in America and sent to Japan. They don't do the more impressive tricks Mighty Orbots or an original Japanese production would have done, like a close-in on a moving ship as it whizzes by you, or circling the main character. What they do, however, they do well. This is not great television, far from it, but if you like to see some nice animation, this isn't too bad. As a footnote, I've noticed they took out the credit that tells who did the animation. I think that this is a crime. I truly doubt that the people who watch would like to know more about the script editors than the animators. I've seen several where it credited Toei Doga for the animation. Transformers rates a 4 on the Flanimation scale, and just to give you what a 4 translates to, 6 is see it, record it, watch it several times a day. 5 is record it, watch it while some Drek is playing on TV, and it gives examples of what would rate a 6 and a 5. So a 6 would be Macross, a 5 would be Mospeada, a 4, which is what Transformers got, is watch it if you happen to be in the room at the time, and Southern Cross is the one they use here. 3 is not offensive, not impressive. That would be Voltron 3, which I believe is Goal Lion, which is the Voltron we got here as Voltron. 2 is Drek, but with some redeeming factors, such as Spider-Man and his amazing friends. And 1 is pure Drek, and that would be GoBots. So there is your Flanimation scale. Transformers rating a 4. I don't know if I agree with a lot of this review. Clearly, it stood the test of time. But I think the biggest... some of it is pretty boilerplate review of this show, especially from... someone who is clearly older than the target audience. The part about the soundtrack being unimpressive is way off, in my estimation. The soundtrack for the show, while it does repeat in a lot of places, is very compelling to what's on the screen. And you can clearly tell that once you see a show that doesn't have a good soundtrack and doesn't have a compelling musical theme to carry the show. And that's just my 2 cents on the review, but that is what Usenet is for, and it's always fun to note that in 35 or 34 years, Usenet hasn't changed all that much. Now, what has changed a lot in the last 35 years is the video game industry, and in 1985 there was a Transformers game released called The Transformers for the computer system Commodore 64. It was developed by Denton Designs out of the UK for Ocean Software. And for Ocean Software was a company that made games into the 90s eventually was sold to Infogrames, which was eventually bought out by Atari. Denton Designs also designed games into the 90s, most notably the Batman Returns movie adaptation for the Sega Genesis. And for the Commodore 64, they also did a lot of licensed games, such as a game called Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Relax. Oh, but these Commodore 64 games had chiptune audio, so Frankie Goes to Hollywood was done as a chiptune. And just a fun personal story regarding that song and my childhood. My mom liked to make up her own words to songs and make them fun or funny. And the song Relax to her was always sung as relax, don't do it, pick your nose and chew it. And so that song it does hold a very stupid, fun place in my heart. And it's kind of interesting just hearing it as a chiptune, as was the Transformers theme for this game. And both of those chiptunes were composed by Fred Gray as part of his work for Denton Designs. Now, there was an interview with Denton Designs online, and according to one of the folks that worked there, someone by the name of Ali Noble, they said, quote, "I think Transformers was an embarrassment. We find out the game was under a tight deadline, and according to designer Steve Kane, quote, we were all under so much pressure. I designed it, so I take all of the blame for it. It was the worst game Denton's ever did, and it was their biggest seller." End quote. So the game, and I've watched a few trailers for it, playthroughs for it on YouTube. The game basically had a team of 5 playable Autobots: Optimus Prime, Jazz, Bumblebee, Mirage, and Hound. They could run, they could fly, they could shoot, and they could transform. They needed to do certain ones of those things over platforms or up and down inclines, but certain other ones would cause them to blow up. Throughout the game, they needed to collect pieces and then bring it back to a square that would eventually form the Autobot logo. Or as one YouTuber put it,
first you choose one of these robots and then you run around and you die.
And that takes us to merchandise. Now, I'm going to cover some of 84 and 85 here because I didn't do this for 84, but look, I'm not going to cover everything. This was the boom of Transformers merchandise at the time. There's a reason why we're still referencing back to 84 and 85 every few years with the toy line. It's because this is the core of popularity for the brand.
When you change into Fun Pals and Underoos underwear, you can pretend to change into a hero.
Mask where illusion is the ultimate weapon by the power of Grayskull. He-Man is here.
Imagine you can change into all your favorite heroes from Superman to Thundercats with Fun Pals and Underoos underwear.
More than meets the eye. The Transformers.
With Fun Pals and Underoos, you can change into a hero.
Freddy, what are you doing up there?
So everything was made back then. Lunchboxes, t-shirts, sheets, cups, mugs, board games, trading cards, stickers, school supplies. You name it, it existed. One thing that didn't exist was a Transformers branded cereal. Now, there was a tie-in with Cookie Crisp, and I think I mentioned this in the toy episode, where you could mail away for a version of Jazz that had a slightly different sticker set on him. But before they had done that, they had actually tested out the notion of doing a Transformers cereal called Transformers chocolate flavored cereal, which was basically Cocoa Puffs. This was never brought to market, but some of the test boxes did leak, and you can find pictures of the box online. The box could be cut up and reconfigured into a robot, and once one of these test boxes actually sold on eBay for $349. Now, one of the more popular characters of the show, one that got made into many things, was Soundwave. He was made into an actual working cassette player. And in the UK, and I think it's UK only, he was made into something called the Design Center. And it was kind of an arts and crafts caddy. So he had things hidden in him. So his head was attached to a ruler and stored in his body. The one arm contained a really crappy pair of scissors, while the other arm contained a pencil sharpener. His legs stored plates to create relief art. If you grew up with little Van Goghs, like I did, which was this little thing where you created relief art where you put a plate down, and for little Van Goghs it was 3. There was a front, a middle, and a back, and you made different vans, and then you put a piece of paper over it, and you had a piece of crayon that was inside of this slider, and you slid it back and forth across the paper, and the impressions from the plate underneath would be the only things drawn on the page, and then you would color in your new drawing. So they had that with Transformers box art as part of his legs. And his chest, you would put the crayon holder and pieces of paper where the cassette would go. And there was this clip-on arm for a pantograph tracing machine as well. In addition to Soundwave getting some love, there was another character that wasn't Rumble and wasn't Frenzy. He was named on the box of a voice changer that bared his face as Enemy. Now, it was just the head of Rumble or Frenzy, either one. It doesn't matter, because this one is pure red, while Rumble or Frenzy is either blue or black with red highlights. This was red with black highlights, and the voice changer was this molded head in red with a silver face, and you talked into it, and it changed your voice into something robotic. They also made the AM radio and headset, which was a working handheld AM radio in basically a box, like a walkie-talkie, and attached to the rear of it was a transforming version of Enemy in the Rumble Frenzy mold. And it was permanently attached to the box, so you had to just transform him into a cassette on the back of this toy radio. Now, also popular, of course, was Optimus Prime, and he had some interesting merch as well. There was the Optimus Prime Oral Care Station, which was an Optimus Prime toothbrush, but not shaped like a toothbrush, shaped like Optimus Prime with a toothbrush attachment in his arm, which was then motorized to brush your teeth. There was also the Vehicle Play Tent, which was a tent you built in the shape of Optimus Prime's vehicle mode, with the exception of Optimus's head still being exposed on the top of the cab. Additionally, as far as wacky merchandising goes, there was the Tech Specometer, or Tech Specometer 11, and this was basically 11 little gadgets in one. It's like a Swiss Army knife of Cybertronian technology, or a sonic multi-tool, if you will. And the Tech Specometer 11 had two forms. One kind of looked like a gun, and the other was basically a square and or a rectangle. In both forms, you could find an altimeter, a compass, a flashlight, magnifying glass, a tape measure, a sundial, a telescope that also worked as a periscope, a mirror, a whistle, and a manual counter dial that you would click, and it would count for you. And it even had a wrist strap, and was basically a very bizarre toy, to say the least. Finally, and I feel like every 1980s toy line had one of these. I know I had one for He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and I don't know if I had a Transformers one, but there were many of these available back then, was the Jumbo Collector's Case. And this was basically a hard cardboard case that opened up and had little plastic slots in it that allowed you to sort and store your toys. And there were 2 released for the Transformers in 84 and 85. The 84 one had the back box art from 1984 and of the Autobots and Decepticons fighting in space, and the second one had a Sunbow image that I totally had as a poster as a kid, and it's Optimus Prime and a bunch of Autobots and Decepticons kind of flying out in various forms, with a giant Decepticon logo and Cybertron at the top and the mountains at the bottom. It's one of my favorite pieces of Transformers art, and I wish I knew where I got the poster from, but I totally had a poster behind my door in my bedroom, probably until I was about 16. And I think I didn't take it down. I put a poster over it because I still wanted it there. So that poster that art is certainly one of my favorite images of all time. It even shows the Ark being shot down by the Nemesis in the sky behind the Decepticon logo. It is really truly a great piece of art that I do need to find a little bit more information on. Finally, speaking of posters, there were 2 very interesting mail-away posters done in 1985. One is called The Power Struggle, and it was a promotional poster available via Frito-Lay Snacks. It features a bunch of very toyetic paintings of Autobots and Decepticons fighting alongside them. There's Hound and Optimus and Megatron, Devastator, Jazz, Shockwave, and Kickback. And it does follow the notion that the Transformers fight over a dam, which happens in the first episode of the show. Now, most of this art is borrowed from another poster that was available in 1985, and that is Battle in the Desert Valley, and that was available via High C brand fruit drinks. There's a short blurb about the battle that involves the Autobots and Decepticons fighting at Boulder Dam. In this image, you have Optimus and Megatron fighting, but you also have Soundwave, Starscream in both modes, Ravage and Buzzsaw, and on the Autobot side, Trailbreaker, Slag, Hound, Sideswipe, Jazz, and the top part of Combat Deck. And with that, we are going to wrap up this edition of Transformers University. I hope you enjoyed this dive into some of the merch from 1985. And if there's any merch you think I should mention or that was particularly impactful to you as a child, or something that always kind of sat with you, please reach out to me on Twitter at TFU_info, or on Facebook and Instagram, facebook.com/TFU.INFO, instagram.com/TFU.INFO. As always, please swing by our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe already. I'm still giving away that studio series, Thundercracker. As soon as we get to 1,000 subscribers, we are just over 100 away. So if you want a chance to win that, you just have to help us get to 1,000 subscribers. It's real easy. Tell your friends, tell your friends of friends, tell your enemies, and tell their friends as well. Next time on the show, we are jumping back into season 2 of the cartoon. We are talking about the final 10 episodes, but not all at once. We're going to do 5 at a time. So we're going to do the first 5 of the final 10 episodes of season 2 in episode 41 of Transformers University. Until next time, I'm your host, Anthony Bricali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the world's longest running transforming toy archive, www.tfu.info. Till next time, see ya.